The gunshot that shattered the silence of Fletcher Morgan's lonely evening was followed by the sound of breaking glass, and before he could even reach for his rifle, a woman came tumbling through his cabin window in a shower of splintered wood and torn fabric. Fletcher lived 3 miles outside of Clifton Hill, Arizona, a small mining town that had seen better days before the silver veins ran thin in 1883. His cabin sat against a rocky hillside, surrounded by nothing but sagebrush and the occasional coyote. He had chosen this isolation deliberately after his wife, Sarah, and their infant daughter had died from scarlet fever 5 years earlier. The solitude suited him, or so he had convinced himself during those long, empty nights when the wind howled through the canyon and reminded him of how alone he truly was. The woman who crashed into his life that October evening was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with tangled brown hair and eyes wide with terror. Blood soaked through her torn dress at the shoulder, and she scrambled backward across his floor like a wounded animal, leaving a crimson trail across the rough wooden planks. "Please," she gasped, her chest heaving. "Please, they are coming. They will kill me. They will kill anyone who helps me." Fletcher was 30 years old, tall and weathered from years of working cattle ranches before he had retreated to this hermit's life. He had broad shoulders, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes that had forgotten how to look at another human being with anything but suspicion. But something in this woman's voice, the raw desperation that went beyond simple fear, made him move. "Get in the back room," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Under the bed. Do not make a sound." She nodded, struggling to her feet, and Fletcher saw her wince as she put weight on her left leg. He caught her arm to steady her, feeling how violently she trembled, and guided her quickly to the small bedroom that he rarely used, preferring to sleep in a chair by the fire most nights. "Go," he urged, and she dropped to the floor and rolled under the narrow bed just as the sound of horses reached his ears. Fletcher returned to the main room, kicking sawdust over the blood trail as best he could in the dim lamplight. He grabbed a broom and swept more aggressively, then threw the bloodied sawdust out the broken window. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady as he picked up his rifle and positioned himself by the door. 3 men rode up, their faces hard in the moonlight. The leader was a thick-set man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, wearing a deputy star that Fletcher suspected was either stolen or bought. "Evening," the man called out. "Name's Vance Carruthers. We are tracking a dangerous criminal, a woman. You seen anyone come through here?" Fletcher stepped out onto his porch, rifle held casually but ready. "Out here. I have not seen another soul in 2 weeks. What did she do?" "Murdered her husband in cold blood," Vance said, spitting tobacco juice onto the ground. "Thomas Wright, a respected businessman from Tucson. Stabbed him while he slept and ran off with money that did not belong to her. She is desperate and violent. If you see her, you shoot first and ask questions later." "I will keep an eye out," Fletcher said neutrally, "but like I said, nobody comes out this way much." Vance's eyes narrowed as he scanned the cabin, and Fletcher knew the man had spotted the broken window. "That window looks fresh damaged." "Buck came through about an hour ago," Fletcher lied smoothly. "Big one, must have been spooked by a mountain lion. Went right through before I could even get a shot off." One of the other men, younger with nervous eyes, shifted in his saddle. "We should check inside, Vance, just to be sure." Fletcher's grip tightened imperceptibly on his rifle. "You are welcome to try, but I do not take kindly to strangers in my home. Unless you have a warrant from an actual lawman, you will stay on your horses and move along." The tension stretched thin as wire. Vance studied Fletcher with calculation in his eyes, weighing his options. Finally, he smiled without warmth. No need for trouble, we will keep searching. But if we find out you have been harboring her, you will hang right alongside that murderous woman." "I will keep that in mind," Fletcher said. They rode off slowly, making it clear they were reluctant to leave. Fletcher stood on his porch until their hoof beats faded completely into the night, then waited another 15 minutes before going back inside. He barred the door, covered the broken window with a piece of canvas, and only then went to the bedroom. "They are gone," he said quietly. The woman emerged from under the bed slowly, dust clinging to her torn dress. In the better light of his lamp, Fletcher could see she was younger than he had first thought, maybe 22, with a face that would have been pretty if not for the bruises mottling her left cheek and the split in her lower lip. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they watched him with the wariness of something that had been hunted too long. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to lie for me." "That shoulder needs tending," Fletcher said, avoiding the gratitude in her eyes. "Sit down." She lowered herself carefully into his one good chair while he gathered his medical supplies. Living alone, he had learned basic doctoring by necessity. He had treated his own knife wounds, snake bites, and once, a bullet that had grazed his ribs during a dispute over water rights. "This is going to hurt," he warned, pouring whiskey onto a clean cloth. "The bullet went clean through, which is good, but I need to clean it and stitch it." She nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Do what you need to do. I have survived worse." As he worked, cleaning the wound as gently as possible while she bit down on a leather strap to keep from crying out, Fletcher spoke quietly. "Did you kill your husband?" "Yes," she said when he finished with the first part and was threading his needle. Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "But it was not murder, it was survival." "Tell me," Fletcher said, beginning to stitch. Her name was Catherine Wright, though she said she would never use that last name again. Her maiden name was Winters, and she wanted that name back. Catherine Winters. She had been born in Missouri, the daughter of a schoolteacher who died when she was 15. Her father had remarried quickly, and her stepmother had made it clear that Catherine was no longer welcome. At 17, she had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, desperate to escape a home where she was treated like an unwanted burden. Thomas Wright had seemed respectable in his letters. He was a merchant in Tucson, he wrote, established and looking for a refined wife to help him build a proper home. The reality had been different. Thomas was 43 years old, though he had claimed to be 35. He was also a drunk, a gambler, and a man who believed his wife was property to be used as he saw fit. "The first time he hit me was on our wedding night," Catherine said, staring at the wall as Fletcher worked on her shoulder. Her voice was distant, as if she was describing something that had happened to someone else. "I had hesitated when he told me to undress. I was nervous, scared. He did not like that, said he had paid good money for passage and expected obedience." Fletcher's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "It got worse over time. He would come home drunk and angry, blaming me for his losses at cards. He broke my arm once, cracked 2 of my ribs another time. The doctor knew, but he would not do anything. Thomas was respected in town, or at least feared. He had connections with some rough men, the kind who do things for money and do not ask questions." She paused while Fletcher tied off the last stitch and began bandaging her shoulder. When he was done, she looked at him directly for the first time since starting her story. 3 nights ago, he came home worse than I had ever seen him. He had lost everything in a poker game. Everything. The store, the house, his savings. He was raging, throwing things, and then he said it was my fault, that I had cursed him by being a useless wife. He came at me with his hands around my throat, and I knew this time he was going to kill me. Catherine's hands were shaking now, and Fletcher poured her a measure of whiskey. She took it gratefully, downing it in one swallow. There was a letter opener on the table beside me, silver with a sharp point. I grabbed it and I stabbed him. I did not think. I just did not want to die. He fell and I ran. Took what money I could find and ran. I have been running for 3 days. They have been chasing me the whole time. Those men with Vance, they were friends of Thomas. They want me dead, not arrested. There will be no trial. Why come this way? Fletcher asked. Why not head to Prescott or Phoenix where there are more people, where you could get lost? I was heading to California, Catherine said wearily. Thought I could lose them in the desert, but my horse went lame yesterday. I have been on foot since then. I saw your light and thought maybe I could beg for water for help. Then Vance and his men got close and I panicked. I am sorry about your window. Fletcher sat back, studying her. Everything in him said to stay out of this. He had built his isolation carefully, brick by brick of solitude and silence. Getting involved meant danger, complication, the possibility of caring again. But he looked at this woman, beaten and hunted, and he saw Sarah in her eyes. Sarah, who had been so full of life and light, who had died because he had not been able to save her. You can stay here tonight, he said finally. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next. Relief flooded Catherine's face. Thank you. I will leave as soon as I can. I do not want to bring trouble to your door. Trouble is already here, Fletcher said. Those men will be back. Vance is not stupid. He knows I was lying about the deer. He will come back with more men and he will search this place properly. Then I should go now, Catherine said, starting to stand. But her legs gave out and Fletcher caught her before she could fall. The blood loss and exhaustion had caught up with her. You are not going anywhere tonight, he said firmly. Take the bed. I will keep watch. He carried her to the bedroom despite her weak protests and laid her on the narrow bed. She was asleep, almost before her head hit the pillow, her body finally allowing itself to surrender to exhaustion now that she was somewhere safe, at least for the moment. Fletcher returned to the main room and settled into his chair with his rifle across his lap. The night passed slowly, marked by the sounds of the desert. The yip of distant coyotes, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the whisper of wind through the canyon. He did not sleep, his mind working through possibilities and plans. By the time dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Fletcher had made his decision. He could not send Catherine back to certain death, and he could not simply hide her here indefinitely. Vance would return, probably with a sheriff who might be corrupt enough to look the other way when she was killed, trying to escape. No, they needed a different solution entirely. Catherine emerged from the bedroom as the sun fully crested the horizon. She moved stiffly, pain evident in every motion, but there was determination in her eyes. I have been thinking, she started, but Fletcher held up a hand. So have I. You cannot go back to Tucson. You cannot run west because that is where they expect you to go, and you cannot stay here. So we are going somewhere they would not think to look. Where? Mexico, Fletcher said. It is about 60 miles south. 3 days hard ride, maybe for the way you are injured. I know people in a town called Magdalena just across the border. You will be safe there. Can start over with a new name. Catherine stared at him. You would do that? Risk yourself like that for a stranger? I would, Fletcher said, though he was not entirely sure why. Maybe it was the loneliness talking, the desperate need to do something that mattered after 5 years of existing rather than living. Maybe it was because saving her was a way of atoning for not being able to save Sarah. Or maybe, in some way he did not fully understand yet, this broken woman had reminded him that he was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than grief. We leave in an hour, he continued. I will pack supplies. There is a dress of my wife's in the chest in the bedroom. It will be too big, but it is better than what you are wearing. Get changed and eat something. We have a long road ahead." They prepared quickly and efficiently. Catherine found the dress, a simple blue calico that indeed hung loose on her smaller frame, but she cinched it with a belt and rolled the sleeves. Fletcher packed food, water, ammunition, and blankets. He saddled his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Flint, and then went to the small corral where he kept an older mare that he had been meaning to sell. "You will ride Daisy," he told Catherine. "She is not fast, but she is steady and will not spook easy." Catherine approached the mare carefully, running her hand along the horse's neck. "I have not ridden much," she admitted. "Thomas said it was not ladylike." "You will learn quick," Fletcher said. "We do not have a choice." They rode out as the sun climbed higher, leaving the cabin behind. Fletcher did not look back. He had lived there for 5 years, but in truth, it had never been a home. It had been a tomb where he buried himself alive, and maybe it was time to finally crawl out of the grave. The first day of riding was hard on Catherine. Fletcher could see her struggling to stay in the saddle, her injured shoulder making it difficult to maintain her balance. But she did not complain, just gritted her teeth and kept going. They stopped twice to rest the horses and eat jerky and hardtack, but Fletcher kept the breaks short. He wanted to put as much distance between them and Clifton Hill as possible. As evening approached, they made camp in a small canyon with an overhang that would hide their fire. Fletcher showed Catherine how to hobble the horses so they could graze but would not wander. Then he built a small fire and made coffee while Catherine sat stiffly on a rock, watching him work. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. "I know you are doing it out of kindness, but you have already done more than anyone had a right to expect. You could leave me here with supplies and go back to your life." Fletcher poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "What life? Sitting alone in a cabin, waiting to die. That is not living." "Were you always alone?" Catherine asked. "Or did something happen?" Fletcher was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. He had not talked about Sarah and Emma to anyone in 5 years, but something about the quiet desert night and this woman who had suffered her own losses made the words come easier. "I had a wife," he said finally. "Sarah. We met in Texas when I was working a cattle drive. She was the daughter of a ranch owner, and she had this way of laughing that made the whole world seem brighter. We married fast, maybe too fast, but I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love anything." He paused, sipping his coffee. "We moved to Arizona, started building a life. She got pregnant and we were so happy. Our daughter Emma was born in the spring of '78, perfect little girl with her mother's eyes." Catherine waited, not pushing, letting him tell it in his own time. "That first winter was harsh," Fletcher continued, his voice rough with old pain. "Scarlet fever swept through the territory. Sarah got it first, then Emma. I tried everything. Rode 20 miles to get a doctor, but by the time I got him back to our place, Emma was already gone. Sarah followed her 2 days later." "I am sorry," Catherine said softly, and Fletcher could hear in her voice that she understood that kind of loss. Not the same loss, but the same weight of it. "I blamed myself for a long time," Fletcher said. "Thought if I had been faster, smarter, richer, I could have saved them. Finally realized that was poison thinking. Some things happen that are beyond our control. But by then, I had already built walls so high around myself that I forgot what it felt like to be around people." "What made you help me then?" Catherine asked. "If you had shut yourself away so completely." Fletcher met her eyes across the fire. "Honestly, I do not fully know. Maybe because you reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for. Or maybe because for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than numbness." They sat in comfortable silence after that, finishing their coffee and listening to the fire crackle. Fletcher insisted Catherine take the bedroll while he kept first watch. She was too tired to argue much and fell asleep quickly. As Fletcher sat watching the stars wheel overhead, he found himself thinking about the future in a way he had not done in years. What would happen after they got Catherine safely to Mexico? Would he return to his cabin and resume his solitary existence? The thought felt hollow now, empty in a way it had not just 2 days before. The next day brought new challenges. They had barely been riding an hour when Fletcher spotted dust on the horizon behind them. Riders and moving fast. "We need to move," he said urgently. "Can you ride harder?" Catherine nodded, though he could see the pain in her face. They pushed the horses into a faster pace, heading for rougher terrain where tracking would be more difficult. Fletcher led them through a series of narrow canyons and dry washes, doubling back twice to confuse their trail. By mid-afternoon, the dust had disappeared, but Fletcher did not relax. Vance was persistent and he had resources. They would have to stay vigilant. That evening, they made a cold camp with no fire, eating dried meat and stale biscuits while the desert cooled around them. Catherine's shoulder was bleeding again, and Fletcher changed the bandage by starlight, cleaning the wound as best he could with their limited water. "Tell me about Magdalena," Catherine said as he worked. "What is it like?" "Small," Fletcher said. "Maybe 300 people. It is far enough from the border that the authorities do not pay much attention, but close enough that goods and people flow through regularly. The woman I know there, Senora Martinez, runs a boarding house. She takes in people who need a fresh start, no questions asked. She will help you." "And then what?" Catherine asked. "What do I do with this fresh start?" "Whatever you want," Fletcher said. "Work, learn a trade, maybe eventually move somewhere else if you want. The point is, you will be alive and free to make that choice." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I have never had that choice. From the time my mother died, I have been at the mercy of other people's decisions. My stepmother Thomas, those men chasing me, even you, as kind as you have been, I am dependent on your help." "That will change," Fletcher assured her. "In Magdalena, you will have time to figure out who you want to be." "Who do you want to be?" Catherine asked suddenly. "When this is over and you go back to Arizona," Fletcher paused in his bandaging, considering the question. "I thought I wanted to be alone, to not feel anything. But now I am not so sure that is living. Maybe it is time to figure that out too." The third day brought them within sight of the border. The landscape had changed, becoming more arid and dotted with strange rock formations that looked like giants frozen in stone. The heat was intense, and they rationed their water carefully. Around noon, they stopped in the shade of a massive rock outcropping to rest. Catherine was clearly struggling, her face pale and drawn. The constant riding was taking a toll on her healing shoulder. "We can rest longer if you need," Fletcher said, studying her with concern. "No," Catherine said firmly. "The sooner we get there, the better. I will manage. You are tougher than you look," Fletcher observed with something that might have been admiration. "I have had to be," Catherine said. She looked at him seriously. "Fletcher, what you have done for me, taking these risks, I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything," Fletcher said. "Sometimes people just need help, and if you are in a position to give it, you should. That is all." "It is more than that, though," Catherine insisted. "You could have turned me away. Most people would have. But you chose to see me as a person worth saving. That matters more than you know." Fletcher felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he had not experienced in years. He realized that somewhere in these 3 days of riding, talking, and shared danger, he had started to care about Catherine as more than just someone who needed help. He cared about whether she was in pain, whether she smiled, what she thought about. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "We should keep moving," he said. suddenly uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. They crossed into Mexico as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The border was unmarked here, just a continuation of the same desert landscape, but Fletcher could feel the difference. The air of immediate danger had lifted. Vance and his men had no authority here, and while they might pursue anyway, it would be much riskier for them. Magdalena appeared as the last light was fading from the sky. A cluster of adobe buildings gathered around a small plaza with a church at its center. Dogs barked as they rode in, and curious faces appeared in doorways. Fletcher led them directly to a larger building on the east side of the plaza, its walls painted a faded yellow. Senora Martinez was a woman of indeterminate age, somewhere between 50 and 70, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She opened the door to Fletcher's knock and looked him up and down, then turned the same assessing gaze on Catherine. "Fletcher Morgan," she said in heavily accented English. "It has been 3 years. You look terrible." "It is good to see you too, Isabella," Fletcher said with a tired smile. "I need your help. We both do." Isabella stepped back and gestured them inside. "Come. You look like you have ridden through hell to get here." The interior of the boarding house was cool and clean, with whitewashed walls and simple but sturdy furniture. Isabella led them to a small sitting room and insisted they sit while she brought water, bread, and cheese. "Now," she said, settling into her own chair with the authority of someone used to being obeyed, "tell me what trouble you have brought to my door." Fletcher explained the situation, leaving out nothing. Isabella listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. When he finished, she turned to Catherine. "Show me your shoulder," she commanded. Catherine carefully loosened the dress, revealing the bandaged wound. Isabella examined it with practiced efficiency, then nodded. "It is healing, but not well. The stitches are good, but there is some infection starting. I will make a poultice tonight and change the dressing properly." "Can she stay here?" Fletcher asked. "I have money. I can pay for her room and board until she can work." "She can stay as long as she needs," Isabella said. "As for payment, we will discuss that later. Right now, both of you need food, real beds, and rest. Tomorrow we will make plans." Isabella showed Catherine to a small room on the second floor, then led Fletcher to another at the end of the hall. The room was simple but comfortable, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the plaza. "The girl," Isabella said as she prepared to leave. "You care for her." "I am trying to help her," Fletcher said carefully. "No," Isabella said with a knowing smile. "You care for her. I saw it in the way you look at her. Be careful, my friend. The heart is more dangerous than any gun." After she left, Fletcher sat on the edge of the bed, her words echoing in his mind. Did he care for Catherine? Yes, he admitted to himself. Somewhere between the broken window and this Mexican town, she had slipped past his defenses. But what did that mean? She needed time to heal, to find herself. The last thing she needed was another man trying to control her life. He resolved to help her get settled here, then return to Arizona. It was the right thing to do, even if the thought of leaving her made his chest ache in a way it had not since Sarah died. The next morning brought a surprise. Fletcher was eating breakfast in the small dining room when Isabella appeared with a worried expression. "3 American men came into town at dawn," she said quietly. "They are asking about a woman and a man traveling together. They are staying at the cantina across the plaza." Fletcher's blood ran cold. "Vance." "I told you men like that do not give up easy," Isabella said. "They have no authority here, but that does not mean they will not try to take her by force." "She is not going back," Fletcher said firmly. "I will not let that happen." "Then you need a better plan than just hiding her here," Isabella said. "In a town this small, they will find her eventually." Catherine appeared at the doorway, her face pale. She had heard the conversation. "I have to leave. I am putting everyone in danger." "No," Fletcher said. "We are not running anymore. We are ending this." "How?" Catherine asked. "You said it yourself. There will be no trial. They will kill me the first chance they get." Fletcher stood, his mind working through possibilities. "Then we make sure they do not get that chance." "Isabella, is Father Doming still the priest here?" "He is," Isabella said slowly. "Why?" "Because the law in Mexico recognizes marriage," Fletcher said, the plan forming as he spoke. "If Catherine and I were married, she would be Catherine Morgan, not Catherine Wright. A Mexican marriage certificate would give her a new legal identity. Vance is looking for Catherine Wright, fugitive. He is not looking for my wife." Catherine stared at him. "You cannot be serious. You would marry me. A woman you barely know." "It would be a legal arrangement," Fletcher said quickly, though his heart was beating fast. "A way to protect you. You would not owe me anything. Once things settled down, we could annul it or, well, figure something out." "That is crazy," Catherine said, but he could see her mind working, considering the possibility. "It is the best option we have," Fletcher said. "Vance has no proof you killed Thomas, just his word and the word of his men. But if you are legally a different person with a husband to vouch for you, it becomes much harder for him to make a case." "He could just shoot us both," Catherine pointed out. "He could try," Fletcher agreed. "But killing an American woman is one thing. Killing a married couple in a Mexican town where the people know the priest and will testify, that is different. He would have to answer for it, and men like Vance only take risks when they think they can get away with it." Isabella was nodding slowly. "It could work. Father Domings is a good man. He would perform the ceremony if I explained the situation. And the people here, they do not love Americans who come making demands and causing trouble. They would support you." Catherine looked between them, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "Fletcher, this is too much. You would be tying yourself to me, maybe permanently. You do not want that." Fletcher met her eyes, and in that moment, he realized that maybe he did want it. Maybe not the legal arrangement or the practical protection, but the reality of having Catherine in his life. In just a few days, she had awakened something in him that he thought had died with Sarah. Not the same love, because Catherine was her own person, different and strong in ways that took his breath away. But the possibility of love, the hope of it. "Let me worry about what I want," he said gently. "Right now, the question is what you want. Do you want to keep running, or do you want to take a stand and claim a life for yourself?" Catherine took a deep breath, and Fletcher saw the moment she made her decision. Her shoulders straightened and her chin came up. "I want to take a stand. I want to stop being afraid." "Then we get married," Fletcher said. "Today, before Vance can make his move." Isabella clapped her hands together. "I will talk to Father Domings. Catherine, come with me. We need to find you a proper dress. Fletcher, you stay here and stay out of sight." No need to make things easy for those men. The next few hours passed in a blur. Isabella returned with good news. Father Domings would perform the ceremony that afternoon. She had also managed to find a simple white dress that fit Catherine reasonably well, along with a lace shawl to cover her bandaged shoulder. Fletcher cleaned up as best he could, shaving and changing into his one set of clean clothes. He felt nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he buttoned his shirt. This was not how he had imagined getting married again. His wedding to Sarah had been a joyous occasion, full of music and dancing and celebration. This felt more like going into battle. But as he straightened his collar and looked at himself in the small mirror above the washstand, he felt something else too. Hope. The possibility of a future that was not just empty years of isolation. Father Domings's church was small and cool, the thick adobe walls keeping out the afternoon heat. The priest was an elderly man with kind eyes and hands gnarled by arthritis. Isabella had explained the situation, and he had agreed to help without hesitation. "Sometimes," he said in careful English as he prepared for the ceremony, "God puts people in our path for a reason. You helped this woman when no one else would. Now you help each other. That is what marriage should be, I think. Two people making each other stronger." There were no guests except Isabella, who served as their witness. Catherine looked beautiful in the simple white dress, her dark hair pinned up and her face serious. When she walked down the aisle toward Fletcher, he felt his breath catch. She was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper, more complex. The ceremony was short, conducted in both Spanish and English. When it came time to exchange vows, Fletcher found his voice steady despite his nerves. "I, Fletcher Morgan, take you, Catherine Winters, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, to stand by you, and to give you the freedom to become whoever you want to be." Catherine's eyes were bright with unshed tears as she repeated her own vows. "I, Catherine Winters, take you, Fletcher Morgan, to be my husband. I promise to be worthy of your faith in me, to stand by you, and to honor what you have given me, a chance at life." Father Domings blessed them and pronounced them husband and wife. When he said Fletcher could kiss his bride, there was a moment of hesitation. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement, Fletcher reminded himself. But as he leaned in and gently kissed Catherine's lips, he felt something electric pass between them. From the way her eyes widened, he knew she felt it too. They signed the marriage certificate. Isabella signed as witness, and it was done. Catherine Wright no longer existed. In her place was Catherine Morgan, wife of Fletcher Morgan, legal resident of Magdalena, Mexico. "Now," Isabella said with satisfaction, "let them come and try to take you." They did not have to wait long. Vance and his two men found them that evening as Fletcher and Catherine were walking through the plaza. Fletcher had his arm around Catherine's waist, playing the role of devoted newlywed, but his other hand was never far from his gun. "Well, well," Vance said, stepping out of the cantina with his men flanking him. "Look who we have here, Catherine Wright and her accomplice." "You are mistaken," Fletcher said calmly. "This is my wife, Catherine Morgan. We were married this afternoon by Father Domings. I have the certificate to prove it." Vance's face darkened. "You think you are clever. Marrying her does not change what she did." "I am taking her back to Tucson to stand trial." "You do not have authority in Mexico," Fletcher pointed out, "and you are not a real lawman. That badge you are wearing is from a town that does not exist. I checked." "I am a concerned citizen seeking justice for my murdered friend," Vance growled. "Now step aside, or I will put a bullet in you." Several townspeople had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Among them, Fletcher spotted Father Domings and Isabella. The priest stepped forward, his elderly frame surprisingly commanding. "This is not right," he said in English, his accent thick but his words clear. "You come to our town making threats. These people are married in the eyes of God and the law of Mexico. You have no right to them." "Stay out of this, old man," Vance said dismissively. "You should listen to him," another voice said. A man in his 30s, wearing the uniform of the Mexican Rural Police, pushed through the crowd. "I am Sergeant Ruiz. I heard there were American men in town making trouble. What seems to be the problem?" Fletcher quickly explained the situation while Vance fumed. Sergeant Ruiz listened carefully, then turned to Vance. "You have papers, authorization from your government to pursue this woman in Mexico." "I do not need papers," Vance blustered. "She is a murderer." "So you say," Ruiz replied coolly, "but I see no proof. What I see is a married couple who lives in Magdalena and 3 armed Americans making threats. I think you should leave. Now." "This is not over," Vance said, but Fletcher could see the calculation in his eyes. He had lost, and he knew it. Without official backing and facing resistance from the local authorities, he could not simply take Catherine by force. Not without creating an international incident. "I think it is," Fletcher said. "Go back to Tucson. Tell whoever paid you that Catherine Wright is dead, because she is. There is only Catherine Morgan now, and she is under my protection." Vance stared at him with hatred, then spat at their feet. "You are both going to regret this." But he turned and stalked away, his men following. They mounted their horses and rode out of town as the sun set, leaving a trail of dust and empty threats. The tension bled out of Fletcher's shoulders as they disappeared from view. Catherine was shaking beside him, and he pulled her closer. "It is over," he said softly. "You are safe now." "Thanks to you," Catherine said, looking up at him. "Thanks to everyone." She raised her voice, addressing the gathered townspeople in her limited Spanish. "Gracias. Muchas gracias." The crowd smiled and began to disperse, many of them nodding at Fletcher and Catherine with approval. Isabella came over and hugged them both. "Welcome to Magdalena," she said to Catherine with a warm smile. "Your real life starts now." That night, back at the boarding house, reality set in. Fletcher and Catherine stood in the hallway between their separate rooms, suddenly awkward with each other. They were married but strangers. The kiss at the ceremony had been brief, chaste, and yet Fletcher could not stop thinking about it. "So," Catherine said, breaking the silence, "what happens now?" "I suppose that depends on what you want," Fletcher said. "The marriage is real legally. But it does not have to be real in other ways. You can have your own room, your own life. I will not press you for anything you are not willing to give." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. "You are a good man, Fletcher Morgan. I think maybe the best man I have ever known. But I am not ready to be a real wife. Not yet. There is too much I need to figure out about who I am without someone else defining me." "I understand," Fletcher said, and he meant it, even though part of him felt disappointed. "Take all the time you need." "But," Catherine continued, stepping closer, "I want you to know that I am grateful you are in my life. However that looks in the future, I want you in it." Fletcher felt warmth spread through his chest. "I want that too. More than I thought I would." They said good night, and Fletcher went to his room feeling lighter than he had in years. The situation was complicated, uncertain, but for the first time since Sarah died, he felt like he had a purpose beyond just existing. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Fletcher found work helping a local rancher who needed someone who understood cattle. The pay was modest, but enough to contribute to their room and board at Isabella's. Catherine, meanwhile, began helping Isabella run the boarding house, learning cooking and housekeeping skills she had never been taught. Fletcher would come home in the evenings dusty and tired, and Catherine would have dinner waiting. They would eat together, talking about their days. She told him about the guests at the boarding house, the gossip from the market, the Spanish words she was learning. He told her about the ranch, the difficult bull he had to work with, the plans the rancher had for expanding his herd. It was domestic and ordinary, and Fletcher found he loved it. They were not lovers, not really even husband and wife in the traditional sense, but they were partners, friends. And slowly, carefully, something more was growing between them. One evening, about a month after the wedding, Catherine came to his room and knocked on his door. Fletcher opened it, surprised to see her there so late. "I cannot sleep," she said. "Can we talk?" "Of course," Fletcher said, stepping back to let her in. She sat on the edge of his bed while he took the chair, maintaining a respectful distance. "I have been thinking a lot," Catherine began. "About my life, about what happened with Thomas, about what I want for my future." "And," Fletcher prompted gently when she fell silent. "I realize that I have been afraid," Catherine said. Not just of Vance and those men finding me, but of feeling anything at all. Of trusting anyone, especially a man. Thomas hurt me in ways that were not just physical. He made me believe that I was not worth anything, that my only value was in being useful to him. You know that is not true, Fletcher said firmly. My mind knows it, Catherine agreed. But my heart is still catching up. The thing is, you have never treated me that way. You have given me space and respect and kindness, expecting nothing in return. And I find myself wanting to give you something back, but I do not know how. Fletcher moved from the chair to sit beside her on the bed, close but not touching. You do not owe me anything, Catherine. You being here talking to me, sharing your life with me, that is enough. But what if I want it to be more? Catherine asked, turning to look at him. Her dark eyes were intense, vulnerable. What if I am starting to feel things that I swore I would never let myself feel again? Fletcher's heart was pounding. What kind of things? Safe, Catherine said. When I am with you, I feel safe. But more than that, I feel seen. Like you look at me and see a person, not just a possession or a problem. And I find myself thinking about you when you are not here, wondering what you are doing if you are all right, wanting to hear your voice and see your smile. Catherine, Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. I feel the same way. I have tried not to. Tried to keep my distance because I did not want to pressure you or make you feel like you had to be something you were not ready for. But the truth is, you have gotten under my skin. I think about you constantly. I look forward to coming home because it means seeing you. And when you smile at me, really smile, it makes everything feel right in a way nothing has since Sarah died. Catherine reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I am scared, she admitted. What if I am not ready? What if I cannot be what you need? Then we figure it out together, Fletcher said, squeezing her hand. There is no rush, we have time. I do not want to wait, Catherine said, surprising them both. I have spent too much of my life waiting, being afraid, letting other people make choices for me. I want to choose this. Choose you. Choose us. She leaned in, and this time when they kissed, it was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. It was deep and hungry, a kiss that spoke of loneliness ended and hope beginning. Fletcher wrapped his arms around her, careful of her healing shoulder, and Catherine melted into him with a soft sound that made his pulse race. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Catherine rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. Are you sure? Fletcher asked, needing to know that this was what she truly wanted and not just gratitude or fear of being alone. I am sure, Catherine said, opening her eyes and meeting his gaze steadily. I am not saying everything will be perfect. I have scars, Fletcher, inside and out. There will be days when I am difficult, when the memories are too much. But I want to try. I want to build something real with you. Scars and all, Fletcher promised. I am not perfect either. I have spent 5 years hiding from life, and I am still figuring out how to live again. But with you, I think I can. They spent that night talking, holding each other, sharing the kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with physical passion and everything to do with trust. Catherine told him about her mother, the kind schoolteacher who had filled her childhood with books and stories. Fletcher told her about the ranch where he grew up, the father who taught him to ride and rope. They talked about Sarah and Emma, about the life Fletcher had lost, and Catherine was able to listen without jealousy because she understood that his past did not diminish what they could build together. As dawn approached, Catherine fell asleep in Fletcher's arms, her breathing deep and even. Fletcher lay awake a while longer, watching the light change beyond the window and feeling something he had not felt in years. Contentment. Not the wild joy of first love, but something deeper and more sustainable. The sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Over the following months, their relationship deepened and solidified. They moved into a single room, and Fletcher taught Catherine to ride properly. They would go out on Sundays, riding into the desert with a picnic lunch, and Catherine would laugh freely in a way that made Fletcher's heart soar. He had never seen her truly happy before, he realized. She had always carried tension in her shoulders, a watchfulness in her eyes. But gradually, as weeks turned into months with no sign of Vance or danger, she began to relax. Isabella watched their growing love with satisfaction. "I knew," she told Fletcher one day when Catherine was at the market. "That first night when you brought her here, I saw how you looked at each other, two broken people who could heal together." "I was that obvious?" Fletcher asked with a rueful smile. "To someone who knows how to look, yes," Isabella said. "The question is, what are your plans? Will you stay in Magdalena forever, or will you eventually want to return to Arizona?" It was a question Fletcher had been asking himself. He loved the peace they had found here, the simple life they were building, but part of him missed Arizona, the land he had called home for so long. "I do not know," he admitted. "What would Catherine want?" "Why do you not ask her?" Isabella suggested. "Marriage is about making decisions together, no?" That evening, Fletcher broached the subject over dinner. "Have you thought about the future, about where you want to be long-term?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "I love it here," she said slowly. "The people have been kind and I feel safe. But sometimes I wonder if I am hiding again, running away instead of facing things." "What would you want to face?" Fletcher asked. "The truth about Thomas," Catherine said. "What really happened that night. I killed him in self-defense, Fletcher. I was defending my life. But the official story is that I am a murderer. Maybe I do not want that hanging over me forever. Maybe I want to clear my name properly." Fletcher reached across the table and took her hand. "That is risky. We would have to go back to Arizona, probably have to get a lawyer, face a trial. There are no guarantees it would turn out well." "I know," Catherine said. "But I have something now I did not have before. I have you. I have people who would vouch for me, and I have the truth. Maybe that is enough." "If you want to do this, we do it together," Fletcher said firmly. "But we do it smart. We get legal representation first. We make sure we have evidence and witnesses. And we do not go anywhere near Tucson until we are ready." They spent the next several months preparing. Fletcher wrote letters to a lawyer in Prescott, a man who had a reputation for taking difficult cases and winning them. They gathered affidavits from the doctor in Tucson who had treated Catherine's injuries, testimony that could prove a pattern of abuse. Isabella and Father Domings agreed to testify about the circumstances of their arrival in Magdalena and the harassment from Vance. The lawyer, a sharp-minded man named Edmund Finch, was cautiously optimistic. "Arizona law recognizes self-defense," he wrote. "If we can prove abuse and imminent threat to life, we have a strong case. But you should know, going to trial is always a risk. Juries are unpredictable, and a pretty young woman who killed her husband will face prejudice no matter what the circumstances." "I know the risks," Catherine said when Fletcher shared the letter. "But I want to do this. I want to be able to travel freely, to use my real name, to not have to worry about someone recognizing me and calling the sheriff. I want to truly be free." In the spring of 1884, nearly a year after Catherine had crashed through Fletcher's window, they returned to Arizona. They rode into Prescott with Edmund Finch by their side, and Fletcher stayed close to Catherine every moment. He could see her tension, the way her eyes darted to every stranger's face, but she held her head high. The trial was held in June. The courtroom was packed with curious onlookers who had heard about the case. The abused mail-order bride who killed her husband and fled to Mexico, only to return and face justice. The prosecutor painted Catherine as a cold-blooded killer who had murdered her husband for money. But Edmund Finch systematically dismantled that narrative. He presented the doctor's records showing Catherine's injuries. He brought in the landlady from the boarding house where Catherine and Thomas had lived, who testified about the screaming arguments and the times she had seen Catherine with fresh bruises. He presented evidence of Thomas's gambling debts and violent temper, and he put Catherine on the stand. Fletcher's heart ached as he watched her testify. She was calm and clear, describing the night Thomas attacked her without dramatizing or exaggerating. She admitted to killing him, but explained why she had no choice. "He was choking me," she said, her voice steady despite tears running down her face. "I could not breathe. I grabbed the only thing I could reach. I did not mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop. I wanted to live." The prosecutor tried to break her story, suggesting she had planned it, that she had stolen money and run. But Catherine held firm. "I took money because I needed to survive," she said. "I was running for my life from a man who had beaten me for nearly 5 years. If that makes me a thief, then I am guilty of that. But I am not guilty of murder. I am guilty of wanting to live." Fletcher testified too, explaining how Catherine had come to him and what had happened since. Isabella and Father Domings came all the way from Mexico to testify, and their presence clearly moved the jury. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for nearly 8 hours. Fletcher sat beside Catherine in the hallway outside the courtroom, holding her hand while they waited. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "thank you for everything. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." "You gave me that too," Fletcher said, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "You brought me back to life when I thought I was done living." When the jury finally returned, Fletcher's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. The foreman stood, paper shaking slightly in his hands. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Fletcher Morgan, not guilty of murder in the death of Thomas Wright." The courtroom erupted in sound. Some cheered, others booed, but Fletcher heard none of it. He pulled Catherine into his arms as she collapsed against him, sobbing with relief. Years of fear and running and hiding all released in that moment. "It is over," he whispered into her hair. "You are free. Truly free." They left Prescott the next day, but instead of returning immediately to Mexico, they made a detour. Fletcher had something he needed to do. He took Catherine to the small cemetery outside of Clifton Hill where Sarah and Emma were buried. He had not visited in 5 years, unable to bear the pain. But now, with Catherine by his side, he found he could face it. They stood before the simple markers, and Fletcher felt tears on his cheeks for the first time since the funeral. "Sarah," he said softly, "I want you to meet Catherine. She is my wife. I know you would have liked her. She is strong and brave and kind, and she has helped me remember how to live. I hope you do not mind that I found love again. I will always carry you and Emma in my heart, but I cannot live in the past anymore. I hope you understand." Catherine squeezed his hand, and Fletcher felt a sense of peace settle over him. Sarah would have wanted him to be happy. She had been that kind of person, generous and loving. Saying goodbye did not mean forgetting. It just meant making room for new life, new love. They decided to split their time between Arizona and Mexico. Fletcher's cabin was beyond repair, so they used money from Catherine's trial fund to buy a small ranch closer to Clifton Hill. It was nothing fancy, just a modest house and enough land for some cattle and horses, but it was theirs. They would spend spring and summer there, working the land, and then winter in Magdalena where the weather was milder and they could help Isabella with the boarding house. Their first year of this new life was one of discovery and joy. Catherine learned ranching from Fletcher, proving to be a quick study with cattle and horses. Fletcher, in turn, learned to cook properly from Catherine, who had absorbed Isabella's teachings well. They worked side by side, building something together. In the fall of 1885, Catherine realized she was pregnant. They were in Magdalena at the time, and she told Fletcher over breakfast, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. "Our baby." Fletcher's reaction was complex. Joy, certainly, but also fear. He had lost a child before, lost both wife and daughter to disease. The terror of going through that again was almost paralyzing. Catherine saw it in his face and reached for his hand. "I know you are scared. I am too. But we cannot let fear stop us from living, Fletcher. That is not the life we chose." "You are right," Fletcher said, swallowing hard. "You are absolutely right. I am scared, but I am also happy. So happy, Catherine." They moved back to Arizona for the pregnancy, wanting to be closer to a doctor. The months passed slowly, Fletcher hovering nervously while Catherine bloomed with health and happiness. She had none of the complications Sarah had suffered, and the doctor assured them regularly that everything was progressing normally. In March of 1886, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him William after Fletcher's father. Fletcher held his son for the first time with shaking hands and streaming eyes, overwhelmed by the miracle of this small, perfect life. "Hello, William," he whispered. "Welcome to the world. Your mother and I are going to do everything we can to give you a good life. That is a promise." Catherine watched from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "We did it," she said softly. "We made something beautiful together." The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, and there were seasons of drought and seasons of plenty. They had arguments, as all married couples do. Catherine still had nightmares sometimes about Thomas, and Fletcher had moments when his old grief would surface unexpectedly. But they faced everything together, as partners. William grew into a bright, energetic child who loved horses and following his father around the ranch. In 1888, they had a daughter they named Emma, after Fletcher's first child. Catherine had suggested the name, understanding that honoring the past did not diminish their present love. They built friendships in Clifton Hill, becoming respected members of the community. The story of how they met, the trial, all of it became part of the local lore, but people judged them by who they were now. Hardworking, honest folks who treated others with kindness and respect. Fletcher taught William to ride when the boy was barely 4 years old, the same way his father had taught him. Catherine homeschooled both children, passing on the love of learning she had inherited from her schoolteacher mother. On Sunday afternoons, they would ride out as a family to Fletcher's favorite spot in the canyon, where they could see for miles across the desert landscape. "This is what I wanted to show you," Fletcher would tell his children. "All this space, all this beauty. This is what your mother and I fought for, the freedom to live our lives the way we choose." In the summer of 1892, they made their annual trip to Magdalena. Isabella was growing older now, moving more slowly, but her mind was still sharp and her welcome still warm. She doted on William and Emma, spoiling them with sweets and stories. One evening, after the children were in bed, Isabella, Catherine, and Fletcher sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the stars emerge. "I want to thank you," Isabella said to Fletcher, "for bringing life back to this old woman's house. Watching you two grow together, build your family, it has been a joy." "We could not have done it without you," Catherine said warmly. "You gave me a safe place when I needed it most." "You gave yourself that," Isabella corrected. "I just provided the roof. You did the hard work of healing, of learning to trust again. You should be proud, Mija." Fletcher looked at his wife, still beautiful to him after 8 years of marriage, and felt overwhelming gratitude. "Do you remember that night you crashed through my window?" he asked with a slight smile. "How could I forget?" Catherine laughed. I thought you were going to shoot me." "I almost did," Fletcher admitted. "But something stopped me. Maybe it was fate or God or just luck. But I am glad I let you in. You saved my life just as much as I saved yours." "We saved each other," Catherine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That is what love is, I think. Not one person rescuing another, but two people choosing to face life together." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the Mexican night. Fletcher thought about the long road that had brought them to this moment. The pain and the fear, the trials and the triumphs. It had not been an easy journey, but it had been worth every difficult step. As the years continued to pass, Fletcher and Catherine grew older together. William grew into a strong young man who took over more of the ranch work, as Fletcher's joints grew stiffer with age. Emma became a school teacher like her grandmother, opening a small school in Clifton Hill for the children of ranchers and miners. In 1905, when Fletcher was 52 and Catherine was 44, they became grandparents for the first time. William married a local girl named Sarah, a coincidence that Fletcher found both sweet and a little melancholy, and they had a son they named Thomas Fletcher. "Are you sure about Thomas?" Fletcher asked William privately. "Given Catherine's history, Ma said it was fine," William assured him. "She said that name does not have power over her anymore. She has reclaimed it for something good." When Fletcher asked Catherine about it, she smiled and kissed his cheek. "That boy is nothing like the Thomas I knew. He is pure and innocent, born from love. The name does not scare me anymore. Nothing much scares me anymore as long as I have you." They were sitting on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and red. This was Fletcher's favorite time of day, when the work was done and they could simply exist together in peace. "I love you," Fletcher said, the words as easy now as breathing after 21 years of marriage. "I never get tired of saying it." "I love you too," Catherine replied, taking his weathered hand in hers. "You gave me a future worth living, Fletcher. Every single day with you has been a gift." Fletcher thought about the lonely man he had been, shut away in his cabin, waiting to die. And he looked at the life he had now. A wife he loved deeply, children and grandchildren, a community, a purpose. All because one desperate woman had crashed through his window on a cold October night. "We gave each other that," he said, pulling her close. "A future, a family, a life, together." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Fletcher Morgan counted himself the luckiest man alive. He had loved and lost, had known grief and loneliness. But he had also known redemption and second chances. He had known the miracle of finding love when he thought he was too broken for it. And he had known the joy of watching that love grow and evolve over decades of shared life. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, a place where people died young and dreams died younger. But it could also be a place of transformation, where a lonely cowboy and a woman running from her past could find each other and build something beautiful. That was their story, Fletcher thought as Catherine dozed against his shoulder. Not a fairy tale with a prince and princess, but something better. A real story about real people who chose each other every day, through good times and bad, through fear and joy, through all the messy, complicated, wonderful years of a life lived together. And it was a story with a happy ending after all. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had found what they were searching for. A place to belong, a person to love, and a future bright with possibility. In the spring of 1910, Fletcher and Catherine celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted long into the night. There was music and dancing, and Fletcher found himself thinking of his wedding to Sarah all those years ago. But this time, there was no sadness in the memory, just gratitude that he had been lucky enough to love deeply twice in one lifetime. As the party wound down and their family members found places to sleep scattered throughout the house, Fletcher and Catherine walked out to look at the stars one more time. 27 years, Catherine marveled. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like no time at all. We have been lucky, Fletcher said, in all the ways that matter. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Catherine asked. If you had turned me away that night, if we had never met, sometimes, Fletcher admitted, but not with regret. Everything happened exactly as it should have. I truly believe that. Catherine leaned against him, and Fletcher wrapped his arms around her, feeling the familiar warmth of her body against his. After 27 years, they still fit together perfectly, two pieces of a puzzle that had found their match. I would do it all again, Catherine said softly. Every hard moment, every scary moment, every single step that led me to you, I would do it all exactly the same. So would I, Fletcher agreed. In a heartbeat. They stood under the vast Arizona sky, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded any dream either had dared to imagine. The future stretched ahead of them, however many years they had left, and they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, two hearts beating as one, the lonely cowboy had found his home. The woman running from her past had found her future. And together, they had found love, the kind that lasts not just through one lifetime but echoes into the next generation and the one after that. A legacy of hope and resilience, and the transformative power of choosing to believe in second chances. As they turned to go back inside, Fletcher paused and looked at his wife one more time. Even after all these years, she still took his breath away. Not because she was young or conventionally beautiful, but because she was Catherine, his Catherine. The woman who had crashed into his life and changed everything. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Catherine asked, smiling. For choosing me, Fletcher said. For trusting me. For building this life with me, for everything. Catherine reached up and cupped his face in her hands. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself. For believing I was worth saving. For loving me into wholeness. They kissed under the stars, a kiss that held 27 years of history and all the years yet to come. Then, hand in hand, they walked back into their home, back to their family, back to the beautiful, hard-won life they had created together from ashes and hope and stubborn, enduring love. And if the desert wind carried their happiness out across the canyon, if the stars shone a little brighter over their small ranch, if the story of the lonely cowboy and the woman hiding from her past became the kind of tale that people told for generations, well, that was as it should be. Because some stories deserve to be remembered. Some love stories deserve to be told. This was one of them.